Welcome to a new segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and Ask Judy. If you're enjoying these, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you'd like to know when I will be posting new episodes. Mike asked, did we get a lot of fan mail? Yes, we did. I remember getting bags of fan mail. So yes, in the thousands, definitely. The show was, once it took off, it was hugely popular, and we all got a lot of fan mail. So that was exciting, particularly in the beginning, to realize that people were watching the show and enjoying it and wanting to reach out to us. So we appreciated that. Another question, this one from Tamara. Was it hard to memorize lines? I never had a lot of trouble memorizing lines. I could sort of get into a zone and knock them off pretty quickly. Some people struggled more with that than others. It is kind of a muscle, and if it's being exercised regularly, I'd been memorizing lines since I was very young. I was kind of in a groove, so it never presented a real problem for me. She also asked, how long were the work days? The work days were, for us, 8 hours. That was child labor laws if you were over a certain age. And it must have been at least 5, because Cammie, the youngest who played Elizabeth, was able to work those 8-hour days as well. Plus, then on top of that, an hour for lunch. Once you were over 18, you could work 12-hour days. And there were times where we did that. Sometimes on like a Friday, sometimes we worked longer if there was a particularly long day or something that they wanted to get that they needed to maybe do at night. There were some times where we worked longer than that, because you also had to give actors 12 hours in between days. So if you finished at 8 o'clock one day, they couldn't bring you in before 8 o'clock the next day. So if they knew they were going to shoot later into the evening, they would choose to do it on a Friday night. So if we didn't finish filming until 10 o'clock, didn't matter, because the next day was Saturday. We took Saturdays and Sundays off. So that was our usual work day. Shoot calls could be anywhere from 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes we started 8 or 8:30. So our hair and makeup calls would be half an hour to an hour before that, so that we were ready to be on set by 8 or 8:30 when they started shooting. If it was outdoors and it was shorter, like in the winter, then sometimes shooting calls were more like 7 o'clock in the morning. So there were, for me, who's not a morning person, there were some early calls. She also asked, did I take classes in acting? As a child, I did have an acting coach for when I first started acting at about 6 or so. And then I worked with a theater repertory company from the time I was about 10 or 11. So I had quite a bit of training prior to the Waltons. I'm not sure with all the other kids. I know for Mary and Cammie, it was their first acting job. So they were just naturals. Eric had worked quite a bit before. I'm not sure if he had any coaching or classes before that. Same with John Walmsley. David Harper was also pretty young, so I think it was one of his early roles. And her last question was, did I ever consider a different profession? Not really, because I was doing it from the time I was very young. There were times where I thought, wow, if I wasn't acting, what might I do? When I was in my teens and started doing a lot of horse riding and jumping and some competition stuff like that, I loved it so much that there were times I thought that if I weren't acting, I would be interested in pursuing work with horses, maybe learning to be a horse trainer or something like that. Because my acting career went well, I never at that point was in a position to have to make that decision. And then later in life, I just kept adding things to what I did, like writing and directing and singing. So I've never totally stepped away from acting. I just keep adding other things. Next question. Were there any friendships with other actors working nearby or child actors in our on-set school? In our on-set school, it was only the Walton cast, but we did meet other actors who were on the lot, particularly when we were working on the back lot, because there might be other shows filming there. The Dukes of Hazzard filmed at Warner Brothers at the same time. So I knew, Tom Wopat and John Schneider. I knew Catherine Bach. James Best, I had actually played his daughter in an episode of Felony Squad, an old show like in the 60s when I was young. He played my father. So I knew a number of those actors, and they would sometimes drive their car, the General Lee, through our set. They drive it into our front yard. And so we would have fun like that sometimes. Also, there were TV shows that had softball teams, and the Waltons had a softball team that I played on, and Mary played on, and I think Eric played on, and some of our crew did, and we would play other shows. I know we played Happy Days. I think we played a Star Trek team, and then we would play other. I remember playing a team that Alice Cooper was on. And then just around the lot, our company also produced the show 8 is Enough. So I knew those cast members and became friends with them. And some of them, like Willie Ames, did an episode of The Waltons before he did 8 is Enough. So we knew him. Radimus Pera, who did an episode, The Ceremony, on The Waltons, then filmed Kung Fu on the Warner's lot. So he would come by and visit, and we would hang out at the lot as well. So yes, we did cross paths with other actors who were working on the lot, and that was always fun. Another question, someone asked if Mary McDonough was as big a snoot in person as Erin was on the show. Absolutely not. Mary is one of my dearest friends and has been since then. And she is kind and generous and just a wonderful person. She's someone that everybody gravitates to. So not at all a snoot. So I'm happy to set that straight. Mike asks about Earl Hamner and what was he like in real life. Earl was around the set a lot because initially he was a creator and a story editor on the show. He became a producer. So he was on the set a lot and was very much engaged in the show all the time. He was a wonderful man. We used to call him Uncle Earl. And he was gentle, witty. He had a wicked sense of humor. Just a genuinely good person that I dearly loved. It was a real loss when he passed. Mike also wanted to know how much the stories that happened were true to life. That I'm not entirely sure of. I think there was a majority of it took a lot of artistic license. I think there may have been stories that were based in some degree of truth or based on someone that Earl knew or a story he was familiar with. But in general, the stories were more fiction than fact. So thanks for that question, Mike. Thank you again for your questions. That's what I have for you on this segment of Ask Judy. I will be back with more of your questions and more behind the scenes of the Waltons. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.